Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
What's up, PGF Nation? We are back. Mike Tomlin out in Pittsburgh. I'm going to recap the NFL wildcard games, of course, and give you my picks for the NFL divisional round. Once again, I'm your host, Brad Fowler. Unfortunately, my co-host, Alex Higdon, is out again. Hopefully, he'll be back soon, so I'm rolling solo tonight. I got a great show for you guys, though. A lot to get to. Look, I was going to record Monday, but of course, the Monday Night Football game, which I really don't understand, by the way. Why are you putting a playoff game on Monday night after you get rid of Monday night for Week 18, but then decide to put a playoff game in the Monday night window? Really didn't make a lot of sense, but regardless, didn't want to put the episode out until that game wrapped. So we're getting it out here on a Tuesday, and I'm glad I did because the news broke today, just a few hours before recording, that Mike Tomlin is out as the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. And look, I was ready to talk about the Steelers-Texans game. Not that there's a whole lot to talk about. The Steelers got absolutely destroyed in that game. That's obviously not really the story here because after this Mike Tomlin news, Mike Tomlin is a guy that absolutely no doubt is going to be in Canton someday. With the resume he had, 20 seasons, not a losing record. I think the message and just where the franchise has gone in the last several years, things had just gotten stale in Pittsburgh. And I understand moving off of Tomlin, even with all the success he had, but 9 straight years without a postseason victory. It's the longest drought in NFL history. Now, I'm seeing reports. ESPN is saying that he's not expected to coach anywhere else in 2026, which I think is interesting because there's some pretty good job openings out there that I think he could potentially be a really good fit for. There's been a lot of talk about him going into the media, maybe taking some time off, which I think makes a lot of sense. I think he'll be great in the media, but I'm sure he's getting a lot of phone calls from multiple teams to see about possibly interviewing as a head coach. And look, the guy's a proven winner. And I understand that things had kind of run its course, so to speak, in Pittsburgh. I understand the frustration from the fans. I understand that this is a team that really hasn't had any postseason success in a really long time. They just were consistently a 9-win team, a 10-win team, basically a wild card team, and just kind of sneak into the playoffs and get beat. I wasn't surprised by this at all. I talked about this game last week. I said I thought the Steelers would get blown out. And I even mentioned last week in the podcast episode that if they get blown out, like I predicted, would this be something that they would consider moving off of Tomlin? I talked about Harbaugh, obviously, and how the Ravens finally decided to move away from Harbaugh. Now Pittsburgh kind of following suit. And this is something that I thought was a real possibility. You know, they're saying it's a mutual parting of ways. I would definitely love to know if that's really the case, because I understand the case being made for it being mutual in the sense that maybe this is mutually beneficial for both sides here. It probably was time for the Pittsburgh Steelers to go in a different direction, and maybe it was time for Tomlin to have a restart with a different organization, because in a lot of ways, Mike Tomlin was kind of a victim of his own success. And what I mean by that is this is a team that just was consistently good, not great, and it put them in a terrible position to be able to replace Ben Roethlisberger. They never had a succession plan for when Ben started aging. And if you look at the last couple of years of Ben, when he was clearly past his prime, and then the revolving door of quarterbacks that they had after Ben, whether it was Mason Rudolph or, they took a swing at drafting Kenny Pickett and that doesn't work out. Duck Hodges, and they go to the clearance rack and they go get Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. And then they try to bring in Aaron Rodgers, which is kind of just a Hail Mary attempt that I never understood from the get-go. He just hasn't had a good enough quarterback to compete for championships. That's just the bottom line. Now, I'm not saying that Tomlin is devoid of any blame here, but it's really hard to win in this league in this era when you don't have a guy. When you don't have a guy who's a legit top 10, maybe the cutoff is top 12 type of quarterback, it's really hard to win in the postseason. It just is. And the one thing that I never completely understood about this season for Pittsburgh, them making these high-profile acquisitions for a guy like Aaron Rodgers, they make the big trade for DK Metcalf, they bring in Jalen Ramsey. it just felt like a team that was operating as if they were a few veteran pieces away from competing for a Super Bowl, when in reality, I never thought they were even that close. I thought this was a team that was competing for a wild card spot, not a Super Bowl position, and it clearly showed that's exactly what they were. I predicted that this was the type of team we would see. It's just an old roster. It's an expensive defense. Look, the defense played pretty well in that Texans game. Multiple turnovers. The defense kind of gave them a chance, but the offense was so bad. I mean, just awful to watch all year long, and just no real weapons. I mean, DK Metcalf, like I said a minute ago, I don't really understand what that move was about. I didn't understand bringing in Aaron Rodgers. I think this season was the year where they should have taken a step back on purpose, so to speak, and just gotten younger, roll with a young quarterback. I know they took Will Howard in the 6th round. I know he wasn't viewed as a guy that you could build around, late round pick. I get that. But at some point, they had to hit the reset button, and then instead they went in the opposite direction. Like I said, this is an aging roster with a lot of aging pieces and some really overpriced players. This is a team that has a major reset coming, and it's going to be really interesting because this next hire is going to be really important, and I have to wonder how good of a job opening is this in Pittsburgh, because this is not the Steelers team that Mike Tomlin took over when Bill Cowher stepped down. Bill Cowher, when he left, they were basically a championship-level team. They were just a couple years removed from a Super Bowl when Mike Tomlin came in. He ends up winning the Super Bowl just a couple years later, going to another one, but it's really kind of just been slowly going downhill from there. Now, the Steelers do have a lot of draft picks. I'm going to be curious to see how many of these veteran pieces they end up either trading or just cutting to try to clear up cap space, try to bring in even more draft capital, because I think there's no doubt whoever they bring in, they have got to get younger, they've got to get cheaper, they've got to address the quarterback position for the long term and stop this revolving door of quarterbacks that aren't going to get you over the hump. It's okay to take a step back in order to take a step forward. I mean, they played the Texans, and I can't help but look at what the Texans were just a few years ago. This was a really bad team, and they had to get bad for a few years before they got good. And sometimes that's unfortunately the way it has to be in the NFL, because once they got bad, they get a top pick, they get CJ Stroud, and a young and up-and-coming defensive coordinator in DeMeco Ryans ends up being an absolute home run. And once you get the quarterback and the coach right, everything can slowly start to fall into place. And now the Texans, look, they might not be a Super Bowl team, but they certainly have a Super Bowl championship level defense. And they're a team that's in the playoffs the last 3 years, winning playoff games and clearly moving in the right direction. And Pittsburgh just seems to be spinning its tires. So I understand the move. I really do. But man, is it going to be fascinating to see what direction the Steelers go. And like I mentioned a minute ago, I can't help but kind of link them with the Ravens, because Harbaugh getting fired last week, very similar resume to Tomlin, but these hires for these two franchises in particular at the head coaching spot is going to be really, really fascinating, because all it takes is a bad hire at the head coaching position and you can really start to go off track. And I can't help but think about a team like the New York Giants, who 10 years ago were coming off of winning 2 Super Bowls with Tom Coughlin, a respected coach. He wins his 2nd Super Bowl in New York. And just a few years later, they have a couple losing seasons in a row. And New York said, look, we're moving on from Coughlin. And it has been a complete downhill slide ever since that decision. And the franchise, quite frankly, has never recovered since firing Coughlin. This once proud Giants franchise that was competing for Super Bowls only has 2 winning seasons in the last 10 years. And one of them was a 9-7 season. And just go look at how bad it's been. 3 wins, 5 wins, 4 wins, 6 wins, 4 wins, 4 wins again this year, 3 wins last year. Once again, just more and more top 10 picks for a franchise that has completely gone off the rails because they couldn't get the head coach right. After Coughlin, it's McAdoo, it's Shermer, it's Judge, and then it's Daboll. Now they fired Daboll. They're looking for another head coach, and they have another top 10 draft pick. This is what can happen to a really great franchise when you don't get the head coach right. All right, but we had a big wild card weekend. Packers-Bears, I thought might have been the funnest game to watch. Ben Johnson, some of the play calling is just elite from this guy. The Bears offense was top 3 in explosive plays this season. And the Bears created 7 explosive plays in the 4th quarter versus the Packers. 7. That's head coaching. That's what a great offensive mind can do for you. That's what has really elevated Caleb Williams this year. He has been so clutch, man. This guy has been so good. That throw under pressure where he scrambles left and drops it over multiple defenders down the sideline to Rome Odunze, that might be the best throw I saw all season in the NFL. And this guy did it on 4th and 8 in the playoffs with the season on the brink. Absolutely ridiculous, man. This guy has so much talent. This is exactly why I was so high on him coming out of USC, because the arm talent, the escapability, I mean, this guy just makes throws that most people cannot make. And look, the people are talking about the collapse by the Packers after the big lead. I'm more impressed with just another great comeback from Chicago. They've been doing this all season long. They are really battle tested. And there's been a lot of criticism this week of Matt LaFleur after this game. There's even been some kind of rumbling about the fan base getting restless with another postseason exit. I get it. You blow an 18-point lead at halftime. Is the criticism fair? I don't know. I understand it, but I don't think this is a Harbaugh or Tomlin situation where you're looking at it saying, okay, can this guy really get us there? I don't think you're at that point. Can this guy get us over the hump? Now, Tomlin and Harbaugh got their teams over the hump, but then they went through a long stretch of not being able to get over the hump. I don't think we're in that situation with Matt LaFleur. I think Matt LaFleur is a really good coach. I think this is a team that, yes, they've had a number of seasons where they didn't meet expectations in the playoffs. I get that. I understand some of the criticism, but I think this is a really good coach who had a team at one point in the middle of the season that I said looked like a Super Bowl team. And I think the injuries caught up to him. Micah Parsons was a major blow to this defense. They just did not look the same after he went out. I still think this is a good roster and a good team. I think if that version of the Packers played this Bears team, I think they would have blown them out. I really do. I think at one point the Packers looked like the best team in the NFL. I just think too many injuries caught up to this team. They kind of limped into the playoffs. That's why I like the Bears in this matchup. Now, I said a lot of great things about Ben Johnson, and he has been awesome. The play calling's been awesome, but the one criticism I have of him in this game is they went 1 for 4 on 4th down in this game, including a failed 4th and 5 at their own 32-yard line, which that was really the play that stood out, where you can't help but watch this and think, what are you doing here? I understand being aggressive. I understand that we're in a new era of football where going for it on 4th down has become the norm, but this is the NFL playoffs, and you're going for it on 4th and 5 at your own 32-yard line. That to me was by far the most head-scratching decision I saw over the entire wild card weekend. The amount of coaches, just on a side note here, the amount of coaches that went for it on 4th down over the weekend, it's just unprecedented. The only coach that didn't go for it on 4th down was Kyle Shanahan, and that was in a close game. That ended up being a very close game, and that field goal that he decided to kick ended up being huge. It ended up being a big difference maker in a close game. So, sometimes the old school way of playing the game isn't always wrong. I think sometimes this hyper aggressive nature of going for it on 4th down, I think it could be a bit much. I really do. I think sometimes we've got to take a step back and just say, look, let's not overthink this. You're trying to outscore the other team. It's that simple. Put points on the board. It's okay to take the points. It's okay to punt sometimes and put your defense on the field and try to get a stop. It's okay once in a while to do that. I understand certain situations call for it. I think certain situations it's smart to go for it on 4th down. But man, the aggressive nature of these coaches sometimes it's just got me pulling my hair out. Now, the most surprising game by far, Rams-Panthers. Look, I think a lot of us did not think this was going to be a close game. It was a 10-point spread. Ended up being a great game, a close game. And shout out to the Panthers here because they knocked them off in week 13 and they almost pulled it off here. I mean, I got to give respect to Bryce Young and the Panthers. They clearly came into this game with a great game plan and they executed it almost perfectly to pull off the win here. And I like what I saw from Bryce Young all season as far as the growth that we saw from him at the quarterback position. But I also like that they put the game in Bryce Young's hand and he responded. I thought he really played a heck of a game. But here's the bottom line. The Rams still have the best quarterback on the NFC side of the playoff bracket. And Matt Stafford, they were down twice in the fourth quarter and he led them back. Absolutely clutch. That ball that he threw on that game-winning drive, the game-winning touchdown pass, I should say, to Colby Parkinson, that was absolutely perfect ball placement. I mean, you want to talk about a perfect throw in a big time moment in a playoff game. I mean, that was just incredible. I mean, Stafford comes out of the game. He hits his first 8 throws for 114 yards and a touchdown. Didn't look great in the middle of the game. He had the hand injury, kind of affected him, it looked like. But down the stretch, he was absolutely lights out. He carved them up over the middle of the field. Puka Nacua. He didn't do a lot on the outsides, but man, in the middle of the field, they clearly had something going in this game with Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. The Panthers were struggling to cover those guys in the seam. The Rams, they really showed their experience in this game, but I thought it was a really nice showing from this Panthers team. And look, I don't know what Bryce Young's ceiling is, if I'm just being honest, and maybe it's not as high of a ceiling as they would have hoped for when they traded up to the number 1 pick to go get this guy, but I think he showed the Panthers enough that they feel good enough to build around him going forward, at least in the short term. That's where it gets interesting, because I think if Bryce Young wants to sign a Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield type of deal, I think that'd be great. I think that's kind of the ideal situation here going forward, is get him on that kind of deal and kind of a prove-it deal, right? A 3-year deal where you kind of see where his development goes these next couple of years. I think they've got some nice pieces here. That throw that he hit Coker on for what looked like was going to be the game-winning throw before, Matt Stafford answered. That was a great throw. He had some really nice throws in this game. They've got some nice young pieces. I mean, Tetairoa McMillan, that guy looks like an absolute stud. I'm going to make my picks later in the episode. At the end of the episode, I'll tell you my picks here for the divisional round. But I will say this. I think the Rams secondary still remains the team's biggest concern. To me, that's the big question mark. They're going to need that pass rush, which they do have some really good players up front, but they're going to need that pass rush to win consistently. Or I do think that's a place where they can get exposed like they did in this game. The Panthers were able to take advantage of that secondary in this game, so that's a little bit concerning, but survive and advance. I mean, that's what it's about. Survive and advance. Now, as you guys already know, we're going to have a new Super Bowl champ this season because the Eagles have already been eliminated. This was a big upset here because, look, on paper, I picked the Eagles going into this game. I thought they had the better roster. They're at home. 49ers are so beat up. They've been without their 2 best players on defense, Fred Warner and Nick Bosa. Those guys have been gone for months. They played more than a month this season without Brock Purdy. George Kittle was in and out of the lineup all season. Of course, he goes down in this game early in the game, so they lose him. They lost their first-round pick, Michael Williams, to injury. I mean, the team had the most injuries in the NFL this year, and somehow they've won 12 games and managed to knock off the defending Super Bowl champs on the road in the playoffs. To me, this was an incredible win for the 49ers. Unbelievable coaching job from Kyle Shanahan this year. I mean, for me, he's no doubt the NFL Coach of the Year for what he's been able to do with all the injuries, managing this team and getting them to where they are in the divisional round is just absolutely incredible. Most teams would have folded a long time ago with what they've had to endure because, and you go back to this matchup here, the Eagles roster, the reason I liked them in this game, even though they were definitely a team with question marks, that's for sure, but the roster is just better. I mean, there's just a better team top to bottom. Like I said, they were at home, but the Eagles offense once again all year was really the reason they failed. The second half duds, that became nearly an every week theme for this Eagles team, and it showed up again in this game where they just couldn't get anything going in the second half. And look, we can blame the offensive line. We can blame the offensive coordinator who just got fired. We can blame the head coach. But here's the bottom line. This team still has elite wide receivers on the outside, a top 3 running back in the NFL, a very good tight end. And even though the offensive line isn't as good as last year, that offensive line is still pretty good. I think we're still talking about a top 10 offensive line in the NFL. So what does that mean when you put all those pieces together? Well, it means that your quarterback hasn't been good enough. I'm sorry, he just hasn't. Yeah, Jalen Hurts was great last year when every single thing around him was perfect. He was great, and they win the Super Bowl. Okay, I get it. But that Eagles team essentially carried him to a Super Bowl. I'm sorry, they did. I'm not saying he never made plays. I'm not saying he didn't even make some clutch plays. He did. But it's time to really stop blaming everyone else, and it's time to point the finger at what is the real problem here with this team. They're limited at quarterback. They just are. They have a limited quarterback who can only do so much. And like I said, last year, they carried him to a Super Bowl win. This team carried him, and then after they win the Super Bowl, it's like everyone just decided, oh, he's a franchise quarterback. I never saw it that way. I never saw it that way. I saw him on way too many top 10 lists. I'm sorry. He's nowhere near a top 10 quarterback in this league. He's always been limited as a passer. And here's the big issue now. He's not running the ball nearly as much as he was in the past. And that is killing this offense, because when he was at his best is when he was a threat to run and it opened up passing lanes for him. Now that he's not doing that, defenses are able to drop back and make it a lot tougher for him to get through his reads and get to these playmakers on the outside. And he just isn't good enough to do it consistently when the run game isn't there. When Saquon Barkley is absolutely running down everyone's throat and the offensive line is making huge holes in the running game, and Jalen Hurts can sit in a clean pocket and let his receivers run wide open, yeah, those throws are easy to make. But guess what? Like I said a minute ago, everything had to be perfect for Jalen Hurts to get to the Super Bowl. And now that it's not, and it's still good. I mean, look, this is still a good team. But now that it's not perfect, we're really starting to see the warts on Jalen Hurts. This Philly defense is still playing at a really high level, and they had 2 short fields that they gave that offense after turnovers and only put up 3 points. And this is where it's going to get really interesting, because we have seen how fast this organization can pivot off of coaches, how fast they can pivot off of players when things start to go sideways. I mean, Sirianni, we have to remember, Sirianni was on the hot seat going into the last season, and then they won the Super Bowl, and he basically took a fire extinguisher to it. But we have to remember how he was viewed going into last season. There was a lot of question marks about this guy still. The Eagles have had questions about Jalen Hurts. Or I should say a couple years ago, they had some real question marks about Jalen Hurts and is he the guy? And if you remember, they loaded up on draft picks to be able to replace him before he had his best season a couple years ago. And they decided, okay, he's our guy going forward. But do we see potentially some major changes in Philly this offseason? I think it's possible. I don't think it's likely, but I think it's possible because of the way this franchise is operated. They were so quick to move off of Doug Peterson shortly after winning the Super Bowl. They were so quick to move off of Carson Wentz shortly after he was in the MVP running. Could it be a situation where they potentially start looking around and saying, look, we need to change things up again? And we need to start looking for a new head coach and possibly trading Jalen Hurts. Look, I'm not predicting that, but I'm starting to wonder, just like I said, with the way they operate and the way this team looks at things and how aggressive they are, they make moves that most teams won't. It feels like this could be a pivot point for this franchise. I'm just saying, this is something to watch here. Now, let's get to the Bills, Jaguars. Look, Josh Allen, absolutely incredible. Josh Allen gets the game ball this week. There's no doubt about it. And look, I was thinking about this before I went in to record this episode. I don't think anybody's had more game balls on this podcast than Josh Allen. He gets another one here. There was a lot of players that I considered here, but this guy was just too good, man. This guy was so lights out in this game. I went on PFF. He didn't log a single turnover-worthy play, according to PFF, in this game. Not one. He only had 2 off-target throws the entire day. Now, once again, the big question mark for me, and it showed up in this game, was I really wonder if the Bills' defense is going to be good enough to get them where they want to go here in the postseason, because the Bills' run defense gave up 154 yards against the Jags. This defense, they really never got it together. They still look very, very shaky to me, and that's very concerning for the Bills going forward here. Now, look, it's nothing against the Jags. They're a good team. You know, this was a good matchup. But Josh Allen, bottom line, Josh Allen is carrying the Bills' offense right now. He really is. Now, don't get me wrong. James Cook, really good running back. I mean, very good player for sure. But outside of James Cook, who really scares you on this offense, honestly? I mean, who scares you for the Bills' offense besides Josh Allen and Cook? Because they really don't have any weapons that any coach is going to go into a game plan and say, boy, we got to stop this guy. That's it. It's Josh Allen and Cook. That's it. And Josh Allen has just been playing so lights out. He's carrying this team to wins like he's done the last couple years. And I think it comes back to something I've said again and again on this podcast. Sean McDermott and his job security is still something to watch. Now, I know he saved his job for another week with this win. And I said going into this game, if they lose this game, I think he's going to get fired. And quite frankly, if they don't make a Super Bowl run, I think he's gone. I do. I think they have to make a legit Super Bowl this run because, look, Joe Burrow and Mahomes and Lamar are not in the playoff field. This is the most wide open it's been in a really, really long time. Now, I don't think the Bills are good enough to get there. I think Josh Allen is, but he's going to have to play absolutely out of his mind to get them there because he's going to have to get through some teams, keyword teams, that are a lot better than his. Now, this is what's interesting. So if they get bounced in the next round, and I'll get to that game in a second, these NFL coaching candidates have to be thinking the same thing as I'm thinking and maybe sitting here waiting to see if that job opens up. Because what kind of coach would not want to coach Josh Allen in his prime right now? I just feel like the Bills' issues, they just feel like they're ultimately going to keep Buffalo out of the Super Bowl. They just do. I just think this team has too many holes. And as great as Josh Allen is, I just wonder, can he really be Superman every week through the playoffs to get him there? I just don't know. If he has one off game, I think they're in huge trouble. And when I say an off game, I just mean where he's not perfect. But I will say this. There is no team left in the field right now with anywhere close to Buffalo's postseason experience. So they do have that going for them. But this is a battle-tested team when it comes to the playoffs. So maybe I'm underestimating that part of this team. I mean, this is the year, like I said, without a dominant team, and there's no boogeyman in Kansas City waiting for you. So once again, Josh Allen, Super Bowl level quarterback, absolutely. The Bills are not a Super Bowl level team, though, and I don't think they'll get there. But just quickly about the Jags here, what a great year one for Liam Cohen. And this is a guy that I think a lot of people were kind of questioning how good was this hire. An offensive coordinator that a lot of people kind of thought, okay, maybe he's going to be the next hot young coordinator in the league. It's not that it was a shocking hire by any means when they picked him up, but I don't know if it was an exciting hire. It wasn't a Ben Johnson type of hire when they got Liam Cohen, but man, he looks like he could be the right guy. Now, it's only year one, but what a great year one for him. He got Trevor Lawrence playing his best football. This is no doubt about it, the best we've seen Trevor Lawrence play in his career. And this team has some talent. They do. They've got some nice pieces here. It's going to be really interesting to see where they grow from here in year two with Liam Cohen, because quite frankly, Jacksonville had the better team this season than the Buffalo Bills. I don't think there's any doubt. This was a better team, a better roster. It's got to be, a tough pill to swallow losing that game when they were so close. But you got to be happy if you're a Jags fan, just the direction that this team is going. Now, speaking of direction, one quarterback is going in the wrong direction because the Justin Herbert bad playoff narrative just continues, unfortunately, for him. And look, I'm not trying to make excuses for Justin Herbert. He has to play better. He has to play better in these big games. I'm not saying that he did not play bad. He did. He did not play well in this game. He did not do enough for them to win. And once again, I'm not trying to make excuses. However, that offensive line was bad. I mean, they were really, really bad in this game. His wide receivers could not separate. Even times where he had time to throw, there was a couple times where there was some coverage sacks because he's going through his reads and there is just nowhere to go with the football. Now, I'll give the Chargers some credit that their defense gave them a chance in this game. I thought they played a really good game, but that Patriots defense, man, hats off to Vrabel and this coaching staff. They were ready for LA. I mean, they got a ton of pressure on Herbert, 6 sacks. Now, like I said, Justin Herbert did not help them out much in this game. He didn't. I mean, he definitely needs to play better in these big games. Otherwise, this narrative is going to continue. But the bottom line when I look at the Chargers, this team overachieved. I mean, they really did. If you consider the injuries, especially up front, that offensive line was a mess. They won 11 games, mostly because of Herbert. Now, the defense was good, and I don't want to take any credit away from them, the defense. But offensively, Herbert carried this team on offense all year long. And the bottom line is the Pats are just the better team. I mean, they are. This was a 2 seed versus a 7 seed, and it looked like it. On Sunday night, Herbert was pressured 38.6% of his dropbacks. He was hit 11 times, and like I said, sacked 6 times. There was a couple times where I didn't even know if this guy was going to get up. I mean, it was bad. He was playing with that broken hand. He's got no running backs to speak of. They can't run the ball. They've got Kamani Vidal basically becomes their number 1 running back because Brian Hampton really couldn't stay healthy this year. Najee Harris, he couldn't stay healthy. The offensive line's a mess. They still need to address the wide receiver room. I know Ladd McConkey's a good player. Keenan Allen, look, it might be time for him to hang it up, honestly. He dropped a couple passes in this game. They've got to address the wide receiver room. I think they've got to address the interior of the offensive line. They're going to get those great tackles back. And then those guys should be healthy and really help this offensive line going into next season. But they've still got some holes on this team. This is still more of a rebuild than I think people are willing to admit here, because they did overachieve and they won 11 games. And look, I thought they'd be a playoff team. I picked them to be the 7 seed, but I would not have picked them if you would have told me that they were going to have all these injuries. There's no way I would have picked them to get there. So I got to give them credit for getting there. But the Patriots, look, I don't think they're getting enough credit for what they've done this year. I don't think Vrabel has gotten enough credit. This team feels like it's playing with house money. They feel like they're a year ahead of schedule right now. And let's look at that matchup because they've got the Texans on Sunday. I'm going to go to the Sunday games here first. I'm going to go backwards here. Texans, Patriots. Patriots, of course, are at home. They're the 3-point favorite in this one. This is going to be my upset pick of the divisional round. I think this Texans defense is absolutely for real. Now, don't get me wrong. That Pittsburgh offense, terrible. Absolutely terrible. It did not surprise me at all that they got crushed by this Texans defense. However, the Texans defense has been crushing everybody all year. This is the best defense in the NFL. And look, I love Drake May. I really like what they've done this year from an offensive standpoint. Travion Henderson, the running game. I like these young receivers, but they are in trouble in this matchup. I really think they are. This Texans defense is good enough to carry this team to a Super Bowl. Now, I'm not picking them to go to the Super Bowl. I'm going to pump the brakes here. But they're that good. That defense is that good that they could go on a Super Bowl run, and I mean it. Now, C.J. Stroud's got to be better. He's got to take care of the ball. He was really sloppy. They got away with a bunch of turnovers because Pittsburgh's offense just couldn't do anything. So he's going to have to elevate his game going forward. I know he's capable of doing that, but as long as he's good and takes care of the ball and they play a clean game on offense, they're going to be a tough out, man. And I think they're going to upset the Patriots here. The other Sunday game, Rams, Bears in Chicago. Rams are a 3.5-point favorite on the road. I'm going to take the Rams in this one. And look, I love the Bears. I love the story. I love what I've seen from Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson, the running game. The defense is a little shaky, though. They give up a lot of yards. I know they get a lot of takeaways, and they make a lot of big splashy plays. They're going to have to in this game. I don't think there's any doubt. They're going to have to take the ball away in this game because I think they're going to have a lot of problems slowing down this Rams passing game. Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, the running backs for the Rams. Stafford is playing great football. This is a tough matchup for the Bears. The fairy tale season probably ends for the Bears. And look, great season for the Bears. If it ends here, no shame in that. They've had a great year. You've seen a ton of growth from this team, and it looks like you've hit on your head coach. It looks like you've hit on your quarterback. And now you have a real team going forward. You have a real foundation to build on, Bears fans. But I like the Rams in this matchup. NFC West matchup, 49ers playing the Seahawks. A little surprised by the spread here. Right now, Seattle is a 7.5-point favorite. And look, a lot of people are going to look back to that last game they played at the end of the year where the Seahawks just dominated the 49ers. That offense couldn't do anything. I think that memory is going to be stuck in people's heads going into this game. That's probably what's got this line a little inflated, in my opinion. Now, I like Seattle from the standpoint of the defense is absolutely elite, and they're playing at home, tough place to play. But these are two teams that know each other really, really well. And this 49ers offense, I think, should play a lot better in this matchup. I think they're going to make some adjustments going into this game. And here's the thing. I don't trust Sam Darnold in big games. I don't. Look, the Seahawks have been great defensively, but this Seahawks team offensively turns the ball over a lot, like a lot. And in big moments and in big games, Sam Darnold has a history of being turnover prone. So if he doesn't take care of the ball here, as great as that defense is, and I think Shanahan is going to have some wrinkles in this offense, I like the 49ers plus 7.5. Look, I don't have the guts to take them in the upset. I almost want to, but I'm not going to. I think Seattle at home finds a way to get the win, but I'm going to take the 49ers plus 7.5 on it from a betting standpoint because I think they can keep this close. This could be a game that comes down to the wire, and I think it will. The other AFC divisional game, Bills taking on the Broncos in Denver. Denver is a 1.5-point favorite in this game. This should be a really, really fun game to watch. Broncos, like I talked about a minute ago with the Bills, Broncos are just a better team, just a much better roster. They have an elite defense. Bo Nix has been playing some really great football. Sean Payton, I think there's a big coaching advantage here for Denver as well versus like I mentioned, Sean McDermott, who I think is clearly squarely on the hot seat still regardless. They're going to have to come in here and win this game to save his job. I really believe that. And I don't think they do. I like Denver in this game. I think that defense is going to be a problem. Now, the biggest X factor of them all, of course, is Josh Allen. Can he go nuclear? Can he just put on the Superman cape and take over this game? Absolutely. We know he's capable of doing that. But I think it's a really tough ask going up against this Broncos defense that is absolutely for real. So I'm going to take the Broncos here. I think the Bills probably find a way to hang around. And if they're in this game late, I would be really nervous because that's when Josh Allen can really be special late in games. But I like Denver in that matchup. Guys, if you enjoyed the show, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Give us a follow on social media at PGF Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Fowler. Hopefully we'll get my co-host, Alex Higdon, back soon. But if not, we're going to keep the show rolling like always, guys. We've got more playoff talk coming up next week. And, of course, the College Football National Championship game. We're going to be previewing that here coming up soon as well. Appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.